Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, Chavra.
Morning.
Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three prakim Rambam. Hilchos Karban Pesach. We are already up to Pedig Vav, prakim Vav, Zayin, and Ches. Pedig Vav is going to speak about the rules regarding someone or someones who are tamei. They get deferred to Pesach Sheni, and then you have scenarios where even though there is tuma, as will begin, that if the majority of the community are tameim lamesim, then they don't get deferred to Pesach Sheni. They actually bring Pesach Rishon bituma. What will be amazing is that we're going to have various scenarios in this Pedic where we're going to learn that certain people, that's going to be in next chapter. I take that back. We're going to learn dinim of Tumas Hatohaim, which was a topic that we spoke about in Hilchos Naziros, and we're going to see how that will affect the dinim of Karban Pesach. Chevra Pedic Vav has 13 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Says the Rambam, Zehu Tamei Shenitchel Pesach Sheni. Says the Rambam, Kol Mi She'eni Yochel Echel Asa Pesach B'Leila Chamisha Asma Pnei Tumasai. Anyone that's not allowed won't be able to eat the Pesach at night because of their tumah. Now note that the Rambam is only going to quote impurities that come from the body. Zovim, men, Zovois, women, Nidois, and Yoldois. And even though a boy ale nida, if someone, God forbid, has a relation with a woman that's a nida, right? It's not that tumah emerged from his body, but he had contact with the nida and he becomes like a nida. Now, all of that is in contrast. Aval, now, I want to make a point over here that in what we mentioned above is only if the 14th day is not, the 14th day of Nisan is not their last day of Tumah in the Tumahs that we mentioned above. These are all people that have to count 7 days. We're speaking about a scenario where it's not that the 7th day, as we'll see more detail soon, is on Erev Pesach. Now, if someone touched an Avela, they're only tummy for 1 day. And not only that, after they go to the mikvah, they're tahirim. Elamad, they're head of shemesh. They only fully become tahir when it gets night. Or if you touch a sheretz, in other words, someone who's tummy on the level here of a rishon, but it's not about the level of rishon. It's that the tumah did not leave their bodies. And if that happened on the 14th day, even though they're tummy now, even though they're tummy when the carbon is going to be slaughtered, that person goes to the mikvah. And then v'shreichten olav achar sheyit boil. Even though he's after the mikvah, he has to wait until night to eat kachim. Okay. Anyways, Karban Pesach, you wait until the night. And let's unpackage this a lot more. Halacha beis. Now, Tamei Meis, shachal shvi shaloi liyois ba'arba asa. So this person needed to count 7 days. Happens to be that the 7th day is the 14th of Nisan. Here, there's something unique. And that's unlike Tamei Meis, is unlike the Zavim, the Zavois, the Nidois, the Yoldois, Ubayalinidas. Unique for Tamei Meis. In other words, he is at the phase, just like someone who became Tamei through an Avela. In other words, he needed to have 7 days, but today's the 7th day. He's after the mikvah. He's after the second sprinkling of the afar mechatos. All he needs to do is wait until it gets dark. Nevertheless, even though you can argue logically, it's like the someone who's negeh but ben avela. The Torah says it's not the same. Ein shreichten olav. Elo nitcha lePesach Sheni, and exactly that's shenemar when it says in Parshas Baha Aloischa that vayihi anoshem asher hoy tmeim lenefesh adam v'lo yachlu lasis haPesach bayem ahu. So mepi Shmuel lamdu that in that case in the Torah their 7th day was on Erev Pesach. And that's why they had even a Havamina. That's why they asked Moshe Rabbeinu, Lama Nigara. You understand? Because they were arguing, we already went to the mikvah. We already had the afar mechata sprinkled on us. All we need to do is wait until it gets night. Why would we be different than Hanegeb and Avela? And that is exactly what Moshe Rabbeinu told them, that no, even after they went to the mikvah, even after there's no action needed, all you need is to wait for time to pass. That's the Gevaldika. Now, by Medvaram Amurim, B'shenitma, not only Tmei Meis, but Betumais min Hamei Shahanazir Megaleach Aleim. If you remember in the 7th chapter of Hilchos Naziros, there were cases, Lemashal, if a Nazir touched, had contact with a Revius Adam that left a mace, even though it's a bona fide Tumas mace, but the dinim that the Nazir loses his days, and then he has to shave his hair, and he has to bring the Korbanos Tuma, that's not for all of the Tamei Mason. So Ayin Sham to learn the exceptions, and those apply over here as well. In other words, even though it's a Tamei Mace, but it's one that She'ein HaNazir Megaleach Aleihem. And again, we're speaking about a case where the 7th day is Erev Pesach, and this person already did all of the actions that need to be done. We're done already. All you need is wait until the night. Now, yes, like someone who became Tami Lechatchila from a Sheretz or an Avela, or like the beginning of Halacha Aleph. Remember that, guys. Zavim, Zavos, Nidos, V'yoldos, V'yale Nidos. In the beginning of Halacha Aleph is only when the Erev Pesach is not on their 7th day. If it's on the 7th day, then they also are allowed to have a carbon Pesach shechted for them. They can't eat it. So it doesn't matter. No one eats it during the day. You have to eat it only at night. At night, you're completely taught. I hope this was clear. Guys, this was the aside of this chapter. Now, Halacha Gimel. If you remember a Zav is someone who has some sort of seminal emission. The Gemara says in Ida, the person does not have an erection. Also, the semen is different. One such an emission is just like a Tumas Balkeri. But if a man had 2 of such emissions on the same day or on 2 consecutive days, that's called a Zav. A Zav who has to count 7 clean days, but does not have to bring the Karbanos that one will have to bring if he had 3 such emissions by coming a Zav Gedolah. So here we're speaking about a Zav, not someone who has to bring Karbanos. Zav Sharash Shtei years. Here you have to have 7 clean days. The Safar Shivas Yamim B'Tava Bashri. Shoichatin Alav Who Oichalo Erev. Again. So Tuma Hayoytze Megufay. If the 7th day is on Erev Pesach, in other words, the only exception is Tamei Meis. Then yeah, as long as he already went to the mikvah, by the way, Azov has to go not to a mikvah, he has to go to a mayon. He has to go to Meichayim. No action is needed, you can shech the Pesach. However, after Zrikas Adam, it's still during the final 7th day, he has another 3rd Re'iyah. And what does that do? That renders him back into a Zav. It knocks off all the prior days. Amazing. Even though de facto he will not eat the Pesach at night, since during the Zrika he was a Ra'ui to eat, so he fulfilled the obligation of Pesach Rishon and he does not bring Pesach Sheni. And the same logic will be when a woman is a Zava. And if she's during the 11 days where she only saw blood on 1 day or on 2 consecutive days, for which she only needs to have 1 clean day. And if you remember, she doesn't go to the mikvah at night. She goes to the mikvah on the clean day. Now, she's not allowed to be with her husband, as we learned, because if she'll have a emission of blood after she went to the mikvah, it's going to knock off that day. She'll actually become a Zava Gedolah. Same thing over here. That she goes to the mikvah. So she was on the 14th day. Guys, women are obligated to bring Pesach Rishon. So she went to the mikvah on the 14th. After she went, and they shechted for her a carbon Pesach. First of all, she can do that and she can eat at night. And even if she'll see a 3rd emission of blood after the Zrika, that means during the Zrika, at that moment, she was fit to eat the meat at night. Even though de facto now she becomes Mamash Zava Gedolah. Now she needs to have a Shivas Nekiyim. Doesn't matter. V'tura Melasa is Pesach Sheni. Gevaldik. Same logic. Now there's an exception. When we learn these dinim, even though nowadays women go to the mikvah at night, but really the only time that you go to the mikvah at night is if a woman is a nidam. A woman who's a zava who needs shivas nekiyim, like all women count shivas nekiyim. When they counted shivas nekiyim, they went to the mikvah during the day. But that's a big difference whether you go to the mikveh during the day or during the night. So a woman, even if her 7th day is Erev Pesach, which means that she'll go to the mikveh at night and then she'll be completely tahira, you can't check the Pesach for her. Because since she only goes to the mikveh at night going into the 8th, and by the way, then she will have to wait. That's the rule. After you go to the mikveh, you have to wait until another getting dark. That means that really she can only eat kachim the next night. And Allah, let's move on to Mechusrei Kippurim. Mechusrei Kippurim are the few people that not only do they have to undergo a period of purification, but even after they went to the mikveh and after it got dark, on the next day they have to bring karbanos. L'mashal l'metzoyra, l'mashal azava gedoyla, l'mashal al yoyledes. So Mechusrei Kippurim, shachal yoyim habas karban asayim barba asar. If the 7th day is on Erev Pesach, of course they cannot be involved in the Pesach, because they cannot eat kachim at night. They have to bring karbanis on the next day. The 8th day is the 14th. That's already good. That's a lot better. In other words, that's the day that all they need to do is to bring their kippurim and then they can eat kachim. So it's very good. So then shechten aleim umakriven karban asayim arba asa. Bein koidem shchitas haPesach bein achas shchitasai. In other words, the beauty over here is that really their karbanos should be brought before the Tamid Shel Beinu Arbaim. If you remember when the Torah says in Parshas Tzav, Oleo Hashlem Kol HaKarbanos Kulam, on the Oila, on the Tamid Shel Beinu Arbaim, so there's a positive commandment for the Tamid to be the last one. Now, the exception is Karban Pesach. The Karban Pesach was slaughtered after the afternoon Tamid. What about a person who's Mechusrei Kippurim and they wrongfully did not bring the karbanos before the mincha of the afternoon? If you remember, we learned this in the Gemara, even though there's a mitzvahs asay of Oleha, but Karban Pesach, which is a mitzvahs asay that carries kares, trumps the mitzvahs asay of Oleha. So even if these karbanos of the Mechusrei Kippurim were not brought prior to mincha, it was not even brought prior to the Karban Pesach. You can even bring it after the Karban Pesach. And then you can eat kacham at night, and indeed, however, but you cannot check the Karban Pesach until at least they gave over their kippurim karbanis to the Beis Din, because maybe they won't bring it, God forbid. Masha Enke, the Beis Din, we are confident that even though the Beis Din did not bring it in the right time, but they will definitely bring it on that day. Halachah. Same idea, it's not enough to have 7 days. He has to have the 7 days. But then after he does the shaving and after he undergoes all of the process, the procedures of the 7th day, then on the 8th day, he has to bring the karbanos. And only afterwards can he eat kachim. But here, look what happened. So he's on the 8th day is on the 14th. Now we just learned in Allah Dalit, you're good. Because bring the karbanos on the 8th day, and you can eat at night. But on top of that, he sees a keri. Now, let me tell you the nuance of seeing a keri. When a person has a seminal emission, not only may they not enter, a person with, not only may they not enter Machna Shechina, they can't even enter in Machna Leviyah. That means they may not be on Harabayas. And that's a big challenge, because if he can't be on Harabayas, the only way the Mitzvah gets his atonement is by having some of the blood smeared on his ear, his thumb, on his toe, then the oil smeared on his ear, on his right thumb and toe. But for that, he has to stand in Shar Niknar. He has to be on Harabayis. So here, something happened to him that's l'chura going to prevent him from even being where he needs to be to get the kippurim of the karbanos of the Mitzvah. We're lenient. Hanei zeh toivel. And he breaks rabbinic law, and we allow him to enter Ezras Nashim, thus allowing him to bring the karbanos of a Mitzvah. I fragt the Rambam, va'afal pishet full yoim osir likanis le'Ezras Nashim. That's why the whole thing, people who go to Harabayis, right? Because they're kind of, even if you know for sure that you're not going in the Makam HaMikdash, but you have to go to the mikvah. It's also, but midrabanan, as the Rambam holds in Bias HaMikdash. And this day, which is the day of bringing the Karbanis Pesach, it's so important. Again, mitzvah say that has kares. So Yova Yasei Sheish Bekoros V'Yitcheisu Shal Devreim. It's amazing. Once he goes to the mikvah, that's important. After the keri, before going to the mikvah, he can't go there. But he goes to the mikvah. You have to wait until it gets dark mid-Rabbanan. We break that Rabbanan. He goes into Ezras Nashim. Then he's allowed to undergo the korbanos of a mitzvah. So all of that is resolved on the 14th. And then at night he eats. Now, Tamei Meis, Halacha Vav, Shchal Shvi Shalaylias B'Shabbos. And here's the thing. You need to have the ashes sprinkled on you on Shabbos, and mid-Rabbanan, we don't do the sprinkling on Shabbos. Now, what did we just learn right now? That we put aside rabbinic law to allow the person to fulfill the Pesach. That's a asay with kares. But we don't say it over here, even though sprinkling the ashes is only problematic rabbinically. Now let's go even more than that. Vafilu chal shviya shaleilias b'shleisha asar b'nisan v'hu Shabbos yidacha liyom arba asar umazin olav but ve'ein shoichten olav k'moshe b'yarnu. Why is that? Because if you remember that by a Tamei Meis, that was the exception. A Tamei Meis, God told Moshe Rabbeinu that even though the 7th day is on Erev Pesach, the logic would be do everything you need to do and eat it at night. Hashem does not allow that. Now the kasha doesn't make sense. It's not fitting. Shabbos is only Shavuos, and a Pesach b'kares. We just said, for example, by this someone about Keri goes into Ezras Nashim. So the answer is in the case of the 13th, because on the 13th there's no chiyuv to shech. You see, when you have right now an obligation to shech the korban Pesach on the 14th. And the only thing that's preventing you is a rabbinic rule that you had a seminal emission and you went to the mikvah, but you didn't wait until the night. You can't go on Harabayas. Right now, one obligation overrides the other. Here in the case of Vav, we're speaking about someone, right, on the 13th day, they have to do a sprinkling. That's already different. Because on the 14th day, it won't even help. Because even on the 13th day, there's no obligation. The obligations are not falling on the same time. Shebeyoim, which is on the 13th. Shu Asr Bazoya, Mishum Shvuz, is not the time of Akrava. The time of Akrava is on the 14th. Only then are you Chayiv Kodesh. Even though we know that this will lead to that, it's not the idme, as we say. Beneged the sugya of Esam Loisasa. Here also, it's a the Rabbanan and it has to be on the same time. How great is that? So we're learning the big rule over here that whenever you can do the steps on the 14th, which will allow you to eat kachim on the night, you could shech the korban Pesach. And again, the big exception is Tumas Meis. And there's no rationale behind that. Tumas Meis is, that's what Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu. Even though if you were to do everything on the 14th, you'll become fully allowed to eat kachim on the night, you can't bring the korban Pesach. Halacha Zayin. Yisrael was an Aron who did a bris milah on Erev Pesach. So then Sheichten Olav after he circumcised himself. Because now there's nothing preventing it, but there's an exception. Avol Ger, someone converts on the 14th day, and on the same day, he has a bris milah and he goes to the mikvah. If that was now it doesn't always happen that way. Remember, we learned you have to have both milah and mikvah, whichever the order, but they don't have to be done on the same day. The Rambam is speaking about someone who did both on the same day. Ein Sheichten Olav. You can't shech for him because he's not allowed to eat at night. Just like if a person touched a corpse, they have to wait, or if someone, they have to, interesting lashon, they have to have 7 days and only then are they pure. He also has to have the 7 days. Why does he have to have 7 days? Really, midoraisa, he does not need to wait 7 days. It's a drabanan. And here, this drabanan will trump the doiraisa. Maybe the next day he'll become Tommy Lameis on the 14th. He'll remember last year, all I did was I went to the mikvah and I ate at night. He's not going to chop. Yeah, last year you went from being a goy to being a yid. That's different. Now you are already Jewish. But he might make them if he eat while the and he's going to erroneously say, well, I went to the mikvah and then they took me, I had a bris milah, they took me to the mikvah, so therefore the Chachamim says that that a ger is different. Again, it's a rabbinic gezerah against the Iraisa, and the Pesach is bekaris. So why don't we say what we said before in Halacha Hey, that if a Mitzvah becomes a Balkeri, he goes to the mikvah, he's allowed to go Nezras Nashu. Which is on the 14th. So says that Rambam like this. And we ideally don't want the convert, if he did not go to the mikvah prior to the bris, which is what they do today. Today they go to the mikvah. No, I think I don't know to say that. The Rambam holds you can go in any order. One thing we don't want someone to have a bris milah, and on the same day, we don't want him to go in on the mikvah. The Eino Toivel, we want for him to first be healed from the milah. If he had a bris milah on the 14th, ideally, b'chlal, we don't want him to go to the mikvah. This is a health reason. And if he would have a bris milah and do what he was told, you didn't go to the mikvah prior to the bris, then wait until you heal and then go to the mikvah. So no one is obliging him to go to the mikvah. He's not Jewish yet. There is no obligation yet. He brought the obligation upon himself. So therefore we say we uphold the rabbinic gezerah. Interesting logic again. So we say even though de facto he went to the mikvah, he is Jewish, he is obligated, but we are afraid that he's going to think that you don't have to wait 7 days if you are Kamei Lemeis, and therefore he's the exception. The rabbinic law and the Yesh Koyach V'Yad Chachamim, especially by the Sheva Al Tasa, even though really it's beyond that. Everyone quotes the Sheva Al Tasa, and you don't go and you don't bring the carbon paste. Halacha 8. Mishabala Beis HaPras. Now there are two. Let's speak about a Beis HaPras, meaning that there was an area in which we know for sure there used to be someone that was buried. There was someone years later that plowed over that field. It was common that the depth of burial then, in the times of the Mishnah, of Chazal, and the plow reached that depth. And therefore we are concerned that maybe the plow broke up the remains of the body and it spread it. Chachamim say, I think it's like 100 amas in each direction. And 1 second, guys, there's no fear of tumas oil, because if the body was dismembered, it's not going to impart oil. But if a fragment of a bone, even only on the size of a so'oida, will have contact with the person, mace will impart to him. Mace mutama etzem kesoid. So there might be a little bone on top of the ground. The Chachamim said, therefore, Kohen is not allowed to walk there. Or we're speaking about someone who walked there, a Yisrael. I'm allowed to walk there, but rabbinically, I'm Tamei. Now comes Korban Pesach. So me, Shabbat Beis HaPras. Well, let's say I'm running to Yerushalayim. The case the Gemara gives is sadly, Reuven is coming late. He's so far away from Yerushalayim that the only way he'll make it on time to bring his Korban Pesach is if he walks straight over through the field and not the long way around it. Problem is, if you walk through this field, rabbinically, you'll become Tamei. So here we allowed for something that we normally don't, to say, no, you're not going to become Tamei. One is, first of all, blow and go and blow and go. Blow means the whole fear is there might be a fragment of a bone. So you step on a place, either prior to it, you have bellows, something that blows all the dust. So if there's a little bone, you blew it aside. Or if you didn't blow prior to walking, you stepped on a place, after you stepped off that someone else should blow on that area, they'll discover whether there was a bone or not. We can rely on that. And if they didn't discover a bone, that means you did not touch it at some kisiyoido. And furthermore, the im leimotza etzem kisa, and if you stepped on a place and you blew on that area and you did not find a bone, even though he worked through a Beis HaPras. And if not for the Korban Pesach, we would not allow this leniency. No, it's here we do say the logic that the Torah mitzvah of Pesach with Chares overrides the rabbinic Tumah of Beis HaPras. Without blowing anything. How do you know that you stepped on something Tamei? You don't. It's only a rabbinic. Another exception that they only make for Pesach, that if you have such a field that many people already walked on. So again, logic is that even if there was, after the plowing, a little fragment of a bone on top of the ground, after so many people trampled on it, that, when you step on something, you insert it back into the ground. Again, there's no oil issue. So here you can also say, if the base of pras was already nidoish, that means many people worked on it. As far as Korban Pesach is concerned, you're not tamei. Tor lo yiseh Pesach. Halacha 9. Ha'oinein ro'oi lechol Pesach le'erev. Oinen is someone who lost one of his or her 7 relatives on the day of the passing. Only the Rambam holds are they an oinen mido'iraisa. An oinen may not eat kachim, even though that state of aminus sometimes goes into the night. Sometimes means that if they buried the person on the day that he or she passed, then there's aninus also at night. The Rambam holds, we already learned, is that if a person passed away today and they only bury tomorrow, even tomorrow aninus is only midrabanan during the day, and at night, b'chlal, there isn't even aninus midrabanan. So one thing we're going to make it clear, that aninus midrabanan will not overweigh not eating kachim. In other words, we're going to ignore the aninus midrabanan. So you can shecht. And again, so you shecht on that person, and they go to the mikvah. Now, why does he have to go to the mikvah? Guys, here's the chaim. If this oinen actually had contact with his relative, of course you don't bring the Korban Pesach. He's a tamei meis. We're speaking about someone who found out that any of the 7 relatives passed away, but he was not tamei meis. Why mikvah? In other words, if you're not going to oblige him to go to the mikvah, there is a possibility that he's going to become tamei. This is like a preventative measure. Now, we keep on mentioning that. I think this is the 3rd time that his relative passed away after mid-afternoon. No, it's first he was chayv to bring a Korban Pesach. Now he became an oinen, so we say that aninus midrabanan does not allow you to eat kachim midrabanan. I put that aside. During the daytime, he's already an oinen mido'iraisa, which means he's exempt. We view him as a person who's not even obligated. He brings it on Pesach Shem. Now, the im shachtu olav, even if he became an oinen prior to chatzos, but they counted him in and they threw the blood, fine. Post facto, another now let's speak about a case that we mentioned where aninus during the day is only midrabanan. If someone had a relative who passed away a day prior, it doesn't have to be the 13th, it can be on the 12th, but for whatever reason, they didn't bury him on the day of passing, which is the ideal, but he buried him on the 14th. Now, the day of burial is aninus midrabanan. And b'chlal, it doesn't even go at night midrabanan. Lefikach. So guys, when do we put aside aninus midrabanan? Only for Pesach, because it's an asay with kares. Guys, don't forget that an oinen cannot eat any kosher. So the Rambam is saying that if he has another korban, let's say it's chayv chatas, it's lamash. He's a shlamim. Sorry, a shlamim, not a chay. He has to bring a shlamim. Can he bring the shlamim? Yeah, if the aninus of the daytime is only midrabanan, which means it doesn't even go into the night. Now another thing. No, of course not. I just mentioned that.
Mace means.
No, clear. No, he did not contact. No contact. Now, one second. He did not bury him. He did not bury him. No, of course not. Now, guys, really, we're going to learn all the way at the end of the Rambam. We're speaking about Shmua Karoiva here. That means that if a person did not know during the passing that his relative or her relative passed away, but they heard it within 30 days, that's what we're talking about. The Yom Shmua, also the minig used to be that they used to bury the person for 1 year, and then they would unbury the bones and gather them and rebury them with the bones of their ancestors. That's called the Yom Likadat Samais. So I want you to know that that day, a person is an oinen only midrabanan. Hareu k'yom ha'kvura. The Yom HaKfura that's not on the Yom HaMisa, which means that you can shech all the kachim for that person. Again, kachim. The chiddush is kachim. Not only Karban Pesach, but if we're speaking about the day of the passing and the day of the burial, then you can only shech the Pesach because of a asay with kares. Halacha. Mishu chayfer bagal. Person is digging a mound. Lavakesh asames. In other words, there was a collapse of a building, and the person is doing the mitzvah of searching for the bodies. Now, when will you become tummy? Well, obviously, if you have physical contact, you'll know that. There's a concern that even if you didn't find the corpse yet, or you were not going to find them, maybe you walked over them. Maybe there's oil. So, Shema Yimtza Meisham Begal. You're looking in this collapsed building. There's a likelihood that you became tummy b'tumas oil, but you tummy b'shas shchita. However, shachtu alav. No, don't do it. But if they shech it for him, and the guy's looking, and at the end, v'loy nimtza shameis. So here we can be lenient, and areza oichal erev. But what happens if nimtza shameis achashin is rekadam oigaval? But this is retroactive. So now the rule is, if it's retroactive with certainty, what will be the example? A great example. Gal ogul. Guys, you remember this? What's gal ogul? That the collapsed building, guys, imagine it, can be very tall, but it's such a small area that when you discover the mace later underneath it, you know for sure you were on top of that. If the collapsed area is much wider, even though you find the mace, you can say, well, maybe when they did the zrika, I was not yet on top. So if you know for sure you were on top, that means that it's like a retroactive, but retroactively you were vaday tamei, but then they have to bring Pesach Sheni. But even if there's only a doubt, and v'shema lo yehoyo oimed alotum b'shas zrika, now you're tamei now. V'lo nitma'ach zrika. Now, guys, this is the big chiddush, and we also learned one halacha yesterday, the first Pedic yesterday, which was complicated. Normally, what do you say by a suffix tumah b'rishus hayachid? Sveikoi tamei. We're machmer. Here we're going to be lenient. Here we're going to say that you don't bring the Pesach Sheni. There's a cloud that you don't bring Pesach Sheni misafik. That was that whole case that we learned at the end of yesterday's shir. Halacha Yudal. Let's apply this to other scenarios. You walk on a road, and later it was discovered that there was a corpse buried to the width of the road. Now here again, guys, we make a difference whether vaday you walked over it to masoil, or whether there's a very small chance that somehow you didn't walk over. Now we have to add another layer. First of all, hold that in mind. Leave it on the low shelf. And now another tumas atohaim. The kids and tumas atohaim we learn in Nuchas Nazirus is that if someone is discovered now to be buried, but we know that no one ever knew they were there, ever knew. Like if someone was murdered, the Rambam already said in Nazirus, that's not tumas atohaim because the murderer knew that the guy was killed. It means someone passed away in the middle of nowhere, and over time, the earth covered him, and now he was discovered. Even though if a person becomes tummy for tumas toim, they cannot eat truma. Nevertheless, regarding Pesach, guys, even if he found out before Zerika, why sitz maratza? Didn't we learn sitz maratza only post facto, not for tumas toim? There's another nuance, David. It has to be a small possibility. No, it's maybe he touched it. For sure, he was mahil. Tumas hatoim b'chlal is only concerning tumas oil. Meishalem means if the corpse would have been split in half, then you can argue maybe you walked in between. You know that you were oil. Now, I want to just add a nuance. If you touched if you touched it, then sitz will be meratza post facto. But if you did not touch it, it's only tumas oil. Sitz is meratza even prior. I'm sorry, what were you saying? It's crazy stuff. But sitz meratza because kachem you need that sitz ritzoy at sitz. Truma has nothing to do with ritzoy. Doesn't bring atonement. Hamed var mamurin b'shoy malach b'raglov sharei efshar sholo yigam. But if you is concerning any type of contact. He's saying that there has to be a small chance if you are carrying something, if you're riding on something, then for sure you had contact. And we already spoke about Tumas Atayim in Hilchos Nazirus Perek Vav. Halacha Yud Beis. Misha asa Pesach v'cheska shutar. And then you find out that you were Tamei b'Tumas Tahayim. Einoi chai v'Pesach Sheni. V'dov ez halachim b'ya Kabbalah. Abel am noy delay shoy Tamei b'Tumah Yedua. Tumah Yedua, as we learned in Nazirus, it's crazy. In other words, if I found out that someone was buried there, but other people knew, they knew 1,000 years ago, it's no more Tumas Atayim, then I'm chai v'Pesach Sheni. Because there's no doubt. And the final halacha Yud Gimel, Misha Nitma B'meis. V'hiza Shlishi U'Shvi'i. Now, Ubashvi, after you went to the mikvah, really, what's the din of it? You're not fully taught until night. But we already learned in this chapter. Ubashvi, Shaloi Nitma B'kever, B'toim V'lo Yodan, on the seventh day, now we discover you became tummy again. Now, one thing is important, guys. The seventh day was not an Erev Pesach. That was the rule we learned in this chapter. But the seventh day was before that. The seventh day was on the 13th. Okay, now you're good. But now you discovered that after you had the process from the 7 days, you became tummy again. Here again, sits Meratzah. You can say pshita. No, this is an intro to the Chiddush. But listen to this. How great is that? You never knew that. On the 6th day or on the 5th day, with the middle of the Shivas Nikiyim, you had a new contact with Tumas HaTohaim. And you didn't know about that. So you didn't know it on the 6th, you didn't know it on the 7th. On the 7th, you had the final sprinkling. That was on the 13th or on the 12th. And now you did the Pesach Rishon, and then you discover, oops, during my 7 days. You don't say Tzitz Meratzah. 1 second, Tzitz Meratzah, Tumas HaTohaim. No. If you were not yet on the 7th day, then you're still in the middle of the Tumah, the original Tumah. The Tumas HaTohaim brought back the original Tumah. The original Tumah is not Tzitz Meratzah. Because since you did not undergo the whole tahara for the original, you are still the cheskas tummy from the first. How gavaldik is that? Okay, Perek Zayin. Okay, so Perek Vav is about what tumah will allow you to still bring it because it's on the 7th day and you can eat at night. And the Chiddush Tamei Meis, even though 7th day is on Erev Pesach, you can't bring Pesach Sheni. Perek Zayin is now going to be about this din that if the majority of the community are Tameim and Mesim, the Roiv HaKol are not pushed to Pesach Sheni. They're not pushed to Pesach Sheni. And we're going to have unbelievable cases where there's going to be groups of Tameim that will not be allowed to bring not the Pesach Rishon and not the Pesach Sheni, as we will see. Perek Zayin has 9 halachas. Let's dive in. Halacha. Rabim Shahoy Tumei Meis Pesach Rishon. If I'm not mistaken, the Gemara gives an example that when a Nasi passes away, there's an obligation on everyone to participate in his burial. And therefore, it's takashayach that the majority of the people will become Tumei Meis. I don't care how possible it is, if that were to happen. If a lot of people still are in the minority of the entirety of the Jewish people, can be 100,000 Jews are Tumei Meis. How many Jews are there? Like the rule is Kashar Tameim, but here is the word Tumei Meis. Guys, Dafka Tumei Meis. David, Dafka, not other Tumas. If the majority of the people have Tumah from Meis, or the majority of the Kohanim are Tumei Meis, or the majority of the Klei Shodasim that are needed are Tumei Meis, and it's in the Roiv, any one of these three, Einon Nidachin, Elo Yakrivu Kolom HaPesach B'Tumah. What does that mean? You don't even have to separate the groups. You don't make an effort, right? Sometimes you say, let the Kohen that's Tahar do it. You don't do it over here. I'll tell you more than that. Sometimes when we say that Tumah Hutra B'Tzibur, we learned to say in 2 or 3 Svarim ago, Tumah Hutra B'Tzibur, guys, remember the klal, only allows for the carbon to be brought. even the Shabbos, even the Tum, but it never allows it to be eaten. With which exception? The only exception is Korban Pesach. Korban Pesach, if the Roiv are Tamei Meis, not only do you do the Zrika, but based on the rule that we learned 2 days ago, that's important, that the Iked of Pesach is the eating. So if Hashem allows it to be brought Betuma, not like other Korbanos, that even when they bring it Betuma, here they eat it. You don't make half, you don't even make an effort to do what you could Betara. It's eaten Betuma. And as it says in Anoshim implies they were not the majority. They were Yechidim. Yechidim nitchem. But Davar Zeh is only Betumas Meis Bilbad, as we learned in Bias HaMikdash, and not for any other Tumah that we learned in the previous chapter that also cannot bring it because they're Tamei. The Roiv Heter is Tamei Meis, Halacha Beis. Now let's go into the cases. That's the classic Talmud cases. Hoya call Mechza Toirim and Mechza Tamei Meis. Guys, it has to be mamish that way. Not count lahavdil, counting the vote. But you raise or stand majority. That's a majority. If it was exactly 50-50, you have God willing, you'll have the way Hashem promised Avraham Avinu Kipshute, right? As numerous as the stars, there'll be 1 billion Jews. That'll be fun. And exactly 500 million. So listen to this. Kulan oisin barishain. However, here the Tohorim have to do it by themselves. They have to be concerned of not becoming Tamei. The Tameim make it by themselves Betuma. And the Tameim who do it Betuma also eat it Betuma, like we mentioned above. That's only, guys, that's only by Pesach, because since Shah Pesach mitchilas lo iba el lachila. Even by one, then you don't even have to keep the segregation. Everyone does it together. Halachi Gimel. We're going to use Peirik Halacha Beis as a basis for the following many Gevaldika scenarios. However, listen to this. There'll be Roif Tohidim. Women are obligated to bring Pesach Rishon. Women are not obligated to bring Pesach Sheni. That will be the big difference. So first of all, Hatohidim Oisim es Harishon. Now they can't do it because we only, even though we allowed 50-50, we only allowed 50-50 if it's taka 50% Tameim. If you add the women, it will make more Tohidim, so they're in the minority. Therefore, they have to be pushed off to Pesach Sheni. But 1 second, when it comes to Pesach Sheni, there we don't count the woman anymore. And we said in Halacha Beis that if it's 50-50, even though you segregate, you don't do Pesach Sheni. So it's going to chop over here that they don't bring the Rishon and they don't bring the Sheni. Wow. And like the Rambam explains, they can't do the Rishon because when you are judging Pesach Rishon, they are in the minority because then women are included. And if with the woman you have Roif Tohidim, they can't do it. They can only do it after 50-50 or more. Because since Shahanoshim b'Sheni Rishus, they're not obligated in Sheni. So when you are analyzing Pesach Sheni, now you're back to the counting where they are Mechza. And the Ein Mechza Oisas HaSheni, as we learned in Halacha Beis, that even by Mechza, you don't defer them. Alama, you segregate, but they don't do it on Pesach Sheni. Halacha Dalet. Choy Reva calls Zavim Mitzrayim V'Alei Midos. Now, guys, remember, Halacha Aleph, that the permit to take the Roy for Pesach Sheni, the permit to do Pesach Rishon, Betuma, is only when Roy are Tamei Meis. Here the case is, the Roy are called Rezavim Mitzrayim V'Alei Midos, which not the way we learned in the previous chapter, in a way that they cannot bring Pesach Rishon. Umiu Tamei Meis. And you have to hide it. Now what do you do? Now, guys, Roiv Hakol, right? You don't have Roiv Tamei Meis to say do it the first. So Oisam Tamei Meis, Ein Oisam Berishain, because if it's only miut, if it's not even half and half, Lefisha Ein miut. And again, the Ein Oisam Es Hasheni, why not? Listen to this. She'ein Hayechidim Oisam Es Hasheni, Ela Bizman, when the Roiv Hakol did the Rishon. Here they didn't do it for other reasons. They were in nidos. They can't hoil v'loyasu reva kol b'rishon lo yasu elu hamiyat atmei le'meis rasheni. Wow. They don't do it. Yeah, it's I say the card. These are scenarios that are, could be never happen. It doesn't matter. That's the way it works. Halacha. Hoy roiv hakol to meis guys halkop. So again, you have roiv hakol to meis. Gotta move. And umiut zavim the chayotze bahen. Now, so what did we say when roiv is to meis? You do it betuma. So the Rambam says that only to the tmei meis. And we said before in Halacha Aleph that the Tameim do it with the Tahirim, but not Tameim and Tameim. Tameim make the Rishon. Why? Roiv do Pesach Rishon. Azovim v'chayotzim ein u'moisim. Lo yis Rishon, lo yis Hasheni. They can't do the Rishon. She'ein nitches bat zibur. You only allow Tumah by Meis, not to Tumah's Zov. They can't do the Sheni, listen to these words, She'ein oisem Pesach Sheni elo im ba rishon betaro, avol im nas rishon betuma. So that was answering your question that you were thinking. So you could also have a scenario where they don't bring, not here and there. That's the answer. Halacha evav. Choyesh shlish hakol toirim, shlish zavim, shlish t'mei meis. So now, once here the Zavim will be better. No, it's when in Halacha Hey, why don't the Zavim do the second one? Because the first one was brought betuma. In Halacha Vav, the first one won't be brought betuma. Why not? Because the only tuma that justifies is Tamei Meis. That Tamei Meis were a minority. Very good. So here we go. So oisam Tamei Meis, they like we explained. Ein oisam esadishin. Because they are mu'atim legabe hatohirim im hazavim. You include the tohirim. Guys, miut tumas meis cannot do Pesach Rishon. Ubasheni lo yasu. We're speaking about the Tamei Meis. Because shaharei miut asu berishon k'moishe biyanu. And what did we learn above? That ein hayechidim oisem sheni ela bezman she'asu roiv hakol. And since Roiv Hakol did not do it, you can't bring. Now the Rambam is asking, with this whole sugi in the Gemara, who are you counting? So it's a very important role. Are you counting all the Jews wherever they live? The answer is no. You are counting the Jews that came to do the Pesach, which is very important. That means that once people presume that a lot of people are Tamei Meis, everyone should go. And whoever arrived are going to be counted to see. Saying even more, David. Many people come to Yerushalayim. Let's say he's giving me an example. Let's say it takes 20 people to eat up an animal. That's like Kezias for everyone. I think that's taka the way it used to be. But they would only send one person to the Azara to represent them for the Shechita. So you don't say every animal represents 20 people. Let's find out those people. Not even that. You count the people that are there. Whoever is there ready. Remember we learned the 3 kitois. Not when they entered, because we don't know yet if they can enter. Tamei Meis. When do you make the count? Before even the first group comes in. You don't count the first group, guys. You count whoever arrived to go into any one of the 3 kitois. Only they are counted. To know this then, let me say this. That definitely helps us understand how is it even shaykh to know if it's 50-50. Yeah. That answers because if you're only counting people that are here, then you make a count. Don't forget, you're not allowed to count people. You have to figure out how to count, whether they give a money, whether they give a lamb, whether, the way we count for a minyan. Say that. There's other dinner. But now you can understand how it's shaykh. Halacha zayin.
You're a tiny portion of people, no?
You're correct. It just makes...
I don't know if it's all fetzy or not.
No, I'm saying if let's assume that you're going to have 1 million people coming.
Yeah.
Just being practical. So, today we from 1 million. No, it's much easier. At least they're all present. It's more shy.
What do? You count those 1,000?
Yeah, you count those 1 million. No, whoever came.
I'm not even gonna come.
No. They would come. In other words, when I think the Gemara gives an example. How is a child? Why would people become Tamid Roiv? Nasi Shemeis, everyone is chayiv to honor him. If a Nasi passes away, he passed away, and everyone participated in his Levaya. Everyone is Shaykh, and many people are Tamid. So once people think that, I think that we're Roiv Tameim, so then everyone would show up to the Harabayis. Dafka to find out, because if people think, hey, there's a possibility that it's Roiv Tamei Meis, let's everyone show up, because if we're not going to have everyone showing up, they're not going to get the numbers correct. Okay, right. Halacha zay. Yochid shenitma b'safik. Reshus hayochid. Now, just quickly, chazaring. We had this we learned this from the Soita. The word Reshus hayochid, Reshus harabim, does not mean what it means in Orchos Shabbos. We have to have that clear. The fact that by the case of a Soita, there were only two people secluded, and even though there is a doubt whether there was an act of cohabitation, we presume that she's tameya until she drinks. That's the source. That Safek Tuma B'Reshus Hayachid, only two people, is Tamei. If there would be one person there witnessing what they did, the Torah Taka gives them honest, right? If even one person says they had a relation, she's Vadi Tamei. So just to remember that. And from there we learn to L'chol HaTorah Kula, Safek Tuma B'Reshus Hayachid Sfeikoi Tamei, Safek Tuma B'Reshus Harabim Sfeikoi Tamei. Now let's apply this when it comes to the Korban Pesach. Yachid Shenitman B'Safek Reshus Hayachid. As we will learn in the next sefer. So we say, Hadezi Yitla Pesach Sheni, Kisha'ar Tmei Meis. No, it's this rule. Sfeikoi Tomei stands. Sfeikoi Tomei. V'tzibur Shenitma B'Sfeikum Reshus HaYachid. Again, based on the fact that we say Sfeikoi Tomei, it's like a biblical din. Since they're Tomei Midoi Raiso, so now, ironically, it presses the button. Roiv Tmei Meis, do Pesach Rishon. If you would say Sfeikotami only be Safek L'chumra, then you can't evoke this L'chumra. No, we're saying Sfeikotami, both ways. Roiv Hakol have a Safek, whether the Tamei Meis.
They were saying Yachid Shenitma B'Safek.
Yeah, only Tamei Meis. Of course, we're speaking only because you said only Tamei Meis is Shaykh to allow Roiv Hakol. Yitchala Pesach Sheni is any Tumah, but to allow Halacha Ches Pesach Shekribu B'Tumah. Oh, another chiddush. We spoke it out already before. Because, guys, many other korbanos, where the Torah writes bimoy adoi, machlal korbanos sibur that have to be brought at a specific time, they also override tumah, but they only override tumah for the zrika part, not for the eating part. That was the whole story with Aaron HaKohen, right? And the chatos, not the chatos oilam. He didn't eat. He had it burnt. So he says like this: that Pesach is the exception. Pesach shegivu b'tumah reis and nechol b'tumah. Because of the unique rule of a Pesach, I got to remember this lashon. All right. In other words, if you touch the nevela, wow. He's writing over here, if a person touched an Avela, that's what he's writing in footnote number 2. The Rambam is telling us, he's inferring, even though they needed to go to the mikvah, and even if they didn't, but they have maga tumois. Maga tumois means they're not tummy from a tumor that left their bodies. If a Pesach was slaughtered for them, they are allowed to eat it. Avol hatamim shatuma yoytza leim migufam, not magatuma, like Zavim and Zavis needs v'yozim mitzrayim. Lo yoichlu mimenu. If there is tamei, however, there's something unique also by Pesach. And if they did, guys, remember one rule. We learned this in the previous sefer. If basar kachim is tamei, eating it is a lav. Terrible. If the person is tamei, eating it is v'karas. The only carbon that even if someone that was tamei, who was not allowed to eat it, who ate it, they'll be pater mikaras. And mepi Shmuel lamdu. This is it's not explicit. The kachim that may only be eaten to tahirim. It is there where the Torah says that if a tamei person eats it, a chayv karas, any kachim though. But hanechol atameim, what's the only carbon that's nechol atameim? Sometimes carbon pesach. even in a case where this person was not allowed to eat it. Remember that? Only the Tamei Mace can eat it. But if someone else ate it, another detail. Tamei Mace can only eat that which is meant to be eaten. This din of Kaddish and Parshas Sav doesn't go to Korban Pesach. Then lo yei ochel. Even though Dovi, they were yoitze. Amazing. If they only became Tomei La'achas Rikas Adam, they were yoitze. That's why we keep on learning. Because B'Shaz, even though Eino Ba'el La'achila, but if B'Shaz Rika, there was a potential. But this din that they can eat it is only if they were Tomei from the beginning. And
separate the Tzaporim from its main?
No, that was only 50-50. Doesn't matter here. Saying if Roiv of the Tzibur became Tomei after Zrikas Adam, amazing halacha. They fulfilled their obligation. But they're not allowed to eat it. This thing that we're saying that not only can you bring it Betuma, but you can also eat it, that is if from the beginning you knew it's being brought Betuma. Halacha 9. Shechatu Betara, like we mentioned, now the Shechita was done Betara. The Nitma Roiv Atzibur Koidem Zrika. How is that even possible? Okay, that was the Gemara, my friends. That the Nasi just passed away, and everyone. Okay, we're speaking about times that there was religious persecution, like we learned a few days ago. There were only 50 people that showed up. We're not speaking about millions of people. That after the Shechita, before the Zrika, the Nasi passed away, and everyone went within his Daladams. Which is we all were mishtated in and we became Tomei. And that's what happened. So Chevre Zoydek es Adam, and here. Really, midin Torah, the ikar is the zrika. And if the zrika was done while they were already roiv to mace, then they should be allowed even to eat it. But here we make a gzeira. Zera shemi yitamo achar zrika b'shana acheres and v'yichlu b'tum. Now, hoya klei shares to main b'sheretz. Huh? Again, we're not saying Rabbi Yaakov. Nitche b'tzibur never allows eating. Nitche b'tzibur, the only exception is Pesach, so we're limiting it. Nitche b'tzibur means the carbon is brought. By Pesach, since Eino Ba'el La'achila, we even allow eating only if they were Tomei. Hoya klei shares to main b'sheretz. Guys, we have to jump ahead to the next sefer. So if you have a Tuma Sheretz and there's contact, halachic contact with the Keli Midoi Raisa becomes a Rishon. Midoi Raisa, a person cannot become a Sheni, which means that if you hold on to the Keli, I, B'chlal, don't become Tamei. Midoi Rabbanan, I have to wash my hands. We're speaking about Doi Raisa, but the food that's in there, if the Keli is even Chulin becomes Tamei. At all, as we learn, God willing soon. That's Matame, like he says, it's even Matame Chulin. Lo ya'asu ela hatohirim. Lo ya'asu ela hatohirim. Because don't forget, when the Rambam began this chapter about the Rambam that were Tamei Meis by Pesach, I know the normal case is Rabbin, but it's not only the people, it's all the Roiv people, guys, Roiv Kohanim and or Roiv Klei Sharis. So that's the case over here. Lo yasu ela hatohirim. Now, what happens over here? You have to appreciate something. Kohanim tohoidim davar are going to do it, which means they'll remain tahor. The meat will become tamei. Mutav sheyei ochel betumas basa shehi balav v'lo yechlu tamei aguf shei mekares. As we just spoke out, as we learned from Sulei HaMikdashim, then people don't confuse. People get confused. So, no, it's when basar kachim is tamei, you're not allowed to eat it. If the person is tamei, it's much more severe. So over here, even though it will override Tumas Basar, but make sure at least you're not overriding Tumas Aguf. Gavaldik. And today's third chapter, Perek Ches, is going to speak about the mitzvah of the eating of the B'sar Pesach. Many pratik dinim regarding the eating. Guys, we're going to define the meaning of na. I know many people type na as raw, not over here. We're going to explain what mavushal means. We're going to see unique dinim by the Pesach. Normally, roasted doesn't have to be the way we think roasting. It can even be in a pot as long as it is cooking in its own juices. Normally, that's called a roasted. Not by Karban Pesach. It has to only be tzliesh. The spits that they would use would not be metal. Not be metal because the metal also gets hot, and the parts of the meat that's touching the metal, imagine, is getting roasted by the metal, not by the ash. We're going to learn it very sometimes when you get other dinim, the definition of bishul normally is that you added something from the outside. Yeah. Water or oil. Normally, David, if you are soil or something in its own juices, even though it's in a pot, it will be considered tziliya, not for over here. Let's go see. Peidik Ches has 15 halachas. Halacha.
We use that halach for kashrut stuff.
Yeah. Halacha. Achilas sar hapesach v'leila chamisha asar. So up until now, we were learning about the shechita. Now that everything was done at Kan, don't forget the shechita of a Korban Pesach. It's a carbon of Yom Yudalid. That's why we learned that if Yom Yudalid is a weekday, imagine they were not allowed to be makter the imurim at night because of the cloud that chaylev of a weekday. Yeah, Korban Pesach is a weekday. It's not a Yom Tov carbon unless it was on Shabbos. The carbon is Yudalid. Yudalid is not Yom Tov. The mitzvah of eating is dafka not on Yudalid. You have to wait until it's dark. Oh, so that's what this Pedic is about. That's a mitzvah saseh. Sheneman parshas boy va'achlos abasar balayla hazeh. Sili eis umatzois al morodim yechlu. Halacha beis. The eight matzah mara ma'akvim, even though the Torah says to eat it together. In other words, if they didn't have matzah mara, they shouldn't say, well, we can't do it. You know, like tefillin shayat, tefillin shodosh. It's two different mitzvahs as we pass. Of course, you do it together. But if you can't, if you don't have it,
nowadays we have matzah mara.
Now we don't. Now it's the opposite. Very good. Yoitzin yedei chava. You can say nowadays we can build them as mizbeach, and therefore let's not. Yoitzin yedei chavasan b'achilas b'sar pesach levadoi. Then you fulfill your mitzvah completely. However, guys, the Rambam is speaking obviously only midoraisa Yaakov. What we're saying now, marar b'lei pesach. Not matzah b'lei Pesach. Matzah b'lei Korban Pesach is doiraisa. Marar b'lei Pesach is taka not doiraisa. It's the Rabbanan. We're mechuy. We say Hashek Hashanah the mitzvah. It's the Rabbanan. Aval Pesach ain't a mitzvah biblically. In other words, the al matzah shumuradim yechlu is not limiting the Pesach. It's not limiting the matzah. It's limiting the marar. Marar is only a chiyuv when you're having it together with the Korban Pesach. Halacha gimel. Mitzvah min hamufchar le'echol b'sara Pesach achila soiva. Guys, let's go say this by heart. There is when you're hungry. There is eating that will bring you to satisfaction. Eating when you're hungry, but even after you eat, you're still hungry. You fulfill the mitzvah, it's not ideal. There is a person who is already full. If they invite to eat, it's called achilas gasa, which halachically is not even called achila. It's garnished. And achilas al hasoiva or achilas soiva means, David, you're almost full. Or you began hungry, but you ate and ate and ate until you came to satisfaction. And by the way, that I'm a more than satisfaction doesn't mean to be full. Really, it means that people should follow those halachas to eat 3/4 full. In other words, to eat until where you normally stop eating. That's the best way of eating. That's reiche eating. I ate and now I feel satisfied. Lafika. Now, another thing we'll say by heart. Aside of the mitzvahs, Re'iyah and Chagiga, that I think is in the next, I think Hilchas Chagiga comes next. Aside of those mitzvahs that are chal on the first day of Yom Tov, including Chamisha Asar, there was something that we call Chagigas Yudalid. Being that we were so afraid of Noiser by the Pesach, so yeah, of course, if we can go from being hungry, everyone is hungry the night of the Seder, to getting satisfied, if we can do that, it's gavaldik. But people would be concerned that maybe there aren't enough people that are going to be able to eat everything up. And achila gasa is not called an achila. It's a bezoin kachah. Even though I already ate a kazais when I was hungry. You don't do that. So normally they would have many people on one lamp. Like we learned 20 people in the last Pedic. And we had a shechita here a couple of months ago, 20 people. You don't need to eat up. There wasn't a kazais even for 10 people from that grace of lamp. In other words, so what do people do? They taka made the right cheshbon and everyone had a kazais. Or two kazaisim. Like this, we know for sure we're going to finish it. But we don't want to eat it and stay hungry. So we would bring another chagiga and we would eat that. And the good thing about that chagiga is that a chagiga is a carbon shlama. A shlama means that there's more time to eat it. There's no pressure to eat it. Everyone would get a proper piece of meat. So you would bring yourself almost to ala soiva, and then you would be mashlim eating the korban pesach. You'd be master with the korban pesach. So he's running like this.
You're supposed to be satiated before?
Fully satiated, no. Fully satiated eating is called achilas gasa. You get a little bit full. If I'm starving, by the way, if I'm starving and I have a lot of korban pesach, I'm also good. My concern is that they never allowed so few people to have that much meat. They made sure that everyone only gets a little part. Okay. So the Seder is, what's that best mitzvah min hamufchar? Not the first bite of steak when you're starving. No. Eat first that. And bring yourself, David, to a place where you're not satisfied yet, but you're getting there. And now that's called mitzvah min hamufchar. Now what happens if it's not mitzvah min hamufchar? If we didn't have chagigas yudalit, so if everyone is already satisfied from eating chulin, then if what to eat is achila gasa, they didn't even fulfill the basic mitzvah. But on the other end, if I'm starving and I have only one kazayis and I'm still hungry, I did the mitzvah. I ate, even though I'm not all the same. Even though it's not until you're satisfied. Now, and the Rambam doesn't have to repeat, but he wrote in halacha aleph. Even if you don't have a maror, you don't have matzah, you still have a positive comment. Halacha daled. The shneyem einam the cholam elo sleep eish. And no. That's a whole machloikas, David. Shnei means Pesach Rishon, Pesach Sheni. Very good. If you remember, by Pesachim, we had a whole, how much do we correlate the Chagig and the Pesach? That's a big argument. And we'll see what the Rambam says. Now we're focusing only on the Pesach. No means lightly roasted. Now, guys, I'm not the maven. Today, when you go into a restaurant, you say medium rare, the balataiva here, or I don't know where it goes from na to proper, but there is a point. And if it's only slightly roasted, not good. Violating a lot. Or if it was mavushal, as we'll explain. Now, being the Torah wrote al, one al, if you did both together, you only chayv malchus once. Because both of them are included in the one love of al toichlu. Now another din. You shouldn't have eaten it then, but you didn't eat it at the time of the mitzvah. Then you're not chayv malchus. Which means the shosh mitzvah lechlot sleep. Then chayv malchus al achilas no mavushol al badyoim pater. Now, I know that you properly roasted it, but you ate it prior to this man. Are you going to get malchus? No. Over al mitzvahs asay. Shenemar v'achlu as habasar hazeh when balayla hazeh. Balayla v'loy bayayim. And v'lav v'balach hazeh asay. Now, no, she'izira olav Torah who habasar she'hiskal boy ma'isa ha'or. That means it began. It was already subjected to fire and already got slightly roasted. But and again, how do you define that? We'll leave it for Tzemach, the greatest chef. I don't know how you define this. Because I would say that the medium rare that people, the balataiva have over here, you give that to my Zayda, he wouldn't touch it. You cut the steak and it looks very red. I don't know how they okay, whatever, when people say it's not good enough, not roy lachila sada. Some people have raw meat, no?
Most people.
It's not about whether you like it.
No. How do you? I'm just saying practically. How do you? I don't know.
Who says whether you like it rare or not? It's probably how we consider it royal.
Okay, so if you eat medium, if most people eat medium rare, and you're ordering a rare, not a medium rare, a rare. This time you have all these 18 madregas in the steak.
Still raw. Yeah.
I don't know. Okay, say that. Seared. See here the Rambam writes, it's unbelievable. See, people don't know this. Talking to me. David, you would think chai means, no, normally means raw. Mamish raw, you're not chai malchus. Now, you didn't do a mitzvah saseh. No, it's non means slightly roasted. So I violated the mitzvah saseh because the Torah says tziliesh. But lav abba michlal says, and I say I'm not going to get malchus. So no, you mabatal and I say you're not going to get malchus. You didn't violate a life. Shenem tzliyesh. Ha she'enoi sali is also usher, but the Rambam wants to say no means partially roasted, not nothing roasted. Shalu called sarchai. Let's go in the opposite direction. You know what called sarchai means? You forgot to take it out of the oven. This happens very often until it becomes ashtikal charcoal. The potter means you potter from malchus again. Oh, it's not. That's not what the Torah. The love of malchus is either no or mevushal. Right. Maybe I don't know. Maybe potter means you fulfilled your obligation of Pesach. I don't know. No, you fulfilled it regardless. No. Potter means you're not going to get malchus. Okay, right. Allah chazai. Mevushal. Let's go to mevushal. Mevushal shizir all of our Torah. What does mevushal mean? This is very important. Also nuance. Of course, if you cooked it in water. Of course, if you cooked it in any other liquid. Or if you put it in made potatoes. Shenemar bashal mevushal. And normally, in other areas, you can say it only goes to water. The double lashon is to be marbe any other liquid that was added. Halacha ches saluhu v'acharkach bishloi. If it was roasted, mamish roasted to achilas adam, and then you cooked it gavaldik. Oh, or the other direction. First you cooked it and then you roasted it. Or even if you made sili kededa, pot roasted is what we mentioned before. In other words, even though in other areas it's called sili, it's not called sili eish. Even if you added nothing. So either, in other words, there was sili and bishul and saliya, or an act that for Pesach is both saliya and bishul, v'achaloi, you will be chayiv malchus. You violated mevushal. Aval, after you properly roasted the meat, you're not putting it in water, but if you're smearing on it wine, smearing on it oil, or other mashkin, umei peidos. I don't know what other mashkin means. If not, what we already mentioned wine. Barbecue sauce. I thought mashke. Chutz min hamayim. You are allowed to smear, but not water. Another din. The people eat steak today. They put it in these dips. Every cup costs $50 over there when you pay for $500 for the steak. Halacha test. Another thing. Al gabe klei even or klei matchis. Can't have the meat touching or kli even or kli matchis. Why? Because if you have a piece of metal, guys, when pot roasted means that there is a pot. That means that there are walls. What happens if I have a blech? Right, and I put the blech over fire. You know what it means? It means, Yaakov, that the juices are not accumulating. That's also problematic. Why? If there's no holes in the metal, because the fire cooked or heated up the metal. The metal is being tsoila. Both stone or metal are not good. But if you had the meat touching something, but that was perforated. Not mistaken, there's a lot of debates with the Rambam on that. That's how we pass. Now, not only can you therefore not put it on a normal slab of iron, normally the spits that they would put meat to put it over coals would be made out of metal. You can't do that either. Because the shvud is cham, kuloi, and even though it's only touching the innards, but that part of the meat is being also tzoiled by mateches. God, if and you removed all of the fire, also a problem. Even though many ovens can stay so hot that you can do things in there. Because it's not saliyach. If you cut it up, not the way they would do it in its entirety, and you hung it over coals, that's good. That is tzliyah. We'll see in a moment that they normally did not cut it up, but we'll get to it. Shalo al gabi sid, if they roasted it over lime or over clay, in other words, all items that are so hot that they have the koyach to be tzoila, but it's not fire, or even chamit tverium. So now, how did they do it? They didn't cut it. They did it was toichavoy mitoich piv. They would have a wooden spit that they would insert in the mouth, and it would go out ad base nakavusai, go on the other end, bishvuchal eights, and they would hang it inside a tanur. It would not be touching the walls of anything, and fire would be underneath it. Now, another detail: nor inside the animal, you have the intestines after they were squeezed out. You have also the legs. So these items, we separated them. The toilet, kerova, benimayov, batanur. In other words, you had them in the oven. You had them in the oven, but you did not have them connected to the body. The word chutzalei goes to the intestines. Because you know what? We viewed the intestines, Yaakov, if you would leave the intestines in it, even though it's only on fire, that's called cooking. Don't leave them inside. Now, what wood was used? Think about this. Some woods have some moisture in it. And we don't even want, imagine, for that moisture, which is going to get very hot, to kaviyachol cook it. So what wood would they use? The spits. The shepud shall remain because it's very dry. If it did touch the wall, imagine because it's licheres. What happens if some juice of the meat normally it goes out, always happens, but then it spritz back, it ricochets back. Wow. Once it got separated, that's asura. Because it's not psartzli. Now it's viewed as a liquid, a charmashkin. And if it spreads back, they clip. Another din, not of minaroit soilis. Now, in other words, if some of the juices fell on soilus, so that juice cannot be eaten. How much of the soilus does it ruin? So there's a machlekes in girsois. Either it says yikleif, I don't know what you have over there, or you have yikmoitz. Yikmoitz means take out a whole fistful. In other words, there's a question what the Rambam wrote regarding how much of the flour, which now has absorbed in it the roitev, and guys, that's the thing, the roitev cannot be eaten. It's not just that the roitev that's separated when it's going to ricochet back will be cooking it. The roitev cannot be eaten. It's not sliesh. This is not sliesh. How can you eat it? It's not slibasa. Sliesh means
you have a piece of pesach on your plate. You cut it, juice comes out. No?
After it's off the fire, it's not problematic. I think while you're eating it, masha enkein. If while you're roasting it, the liquid goes straight into soilus. No, you cannot. When it goes into soilus, the soilus becomes asura. So he's asking, like, what happens with it? You can't have the gravy. Halacha yudal. Which you shouldn't have done. You know why you shouldn't have done that? Because truma can only be eaten by kohanim. Tell you more. Truma can only be eaten by taro. Sometimes a korban pesach is eaten by truma. Sometimes, but you have a group of kohanim. And we learned after you took it off the fire, what did the Rambam write? After you took it off the fire, then you could smear it with other mashkin. So if chaburas kohanim, okay, they did it already, yoichlu. But the imshal Yisrael, now the issue is the belias. Because you have to now remove the oil. Im chayu. If the meat is still raw, it's not hot, right? Tatar gavad, but tatar is cold. Then all you need to do is yidichenu v'yanaged, wipe off the oil, dry it up, and now roast it. V'im tzili, but if it was roasted, so we say that the oil permeated kedei klipa, yiklev asachitzayin. Another din, sachay b'shemen shel ma'aser sheni. Now ma'aser sheni is less problematic; could be eaten in Yerushalayim. And by the way, the meat of the korban pesach can only be eaten in Yerushalayim. So what will be the only issue? The only issue is that when I am charging for other people to join my korban, I cannot charge them for this ma'aser sheni. Lo yasenu davar b'nei chabura. Because charging for Ma'aser Sheni is called Pidyon. She'ein Poida Ma'aser Sheni b'Yishoran Kosher Koimai. Another halacha, the Ein Soilin Psachim Ke'echad. Why? Because we are afraid that they might get mixed up. And what happens if it gets mixed up? What we learned previously, it can only be eaten by Vir Minuyav. I'm not going to know which group has which one. It won't be eaten up. They were yoitze, but we want it to be eaten up. Now, you can argue, when are you afraid it's going to get mixed up if the meats are the same? If you have meat from a gedi, meat from a tle, especially if you learn now that they didn't even cut it, they roasted it raw. You look, you see gedi, you see tle. Even I will, you will notice a difference. Gzeda, if they'll allow to roast together gedi and tle, they might roast gedi. They might roast tle. And then they might get confused. Final halacha tezvav. Far bi'arnu bekama bekoimois. She'ena pesach mechel ela at chatzois. Even though midoraisa taki yav the whole night, that's a rabbinic kedei laharchik mino avedo. However, v'din toida she'yachal kol alayla at she'yal amud hashachar. The kfar bi'arnu behilchas chametz umatzah. Another rule, shehu ton halal b'shas achilosei. So there wasn't only halal when they would do the avoida, as we learned, the levium, but their halal will be said. Another rule, if they already ate the kazayas Yaakov, and now I think there's a seder here, and they're saying halal. There's a minig by many Yidden, many chasheva families, that during the halal, after the meal, some people doze off, which is fine. But if everyone dozes off, that ended the meal. And it can't be choizer v'orchlin. And it doesn't matter if that was later in the night, earlier in the night. No, you're just adding a few dinim. Halal has to be said. And if the entire group dozed off, that ended that sitting, and they can't eat it again, even if that happened, the tchilas alayla got willing to be continued. Gewaldig.